Still in catch-up mode here on Backlash as we talk all this week with our regular guests whom we've neglected for about a month, more than a month, when we just didn't do the show because of Hurricane Irma and the Jewish holiday season. But we're going to talk to Anton now. You can follow him at Anton Wahlman on Twitter, and his Facebook page is really good, and that's ANTON WAHLMAN, and he's in the Las Vegas area, though he's based there. He travels a lot. I don't even know where he is right now. And that's part of California, Nevada, a place that has been in the news a lot lately. In fact, we talked to two people one who lives there, one who's been spending a lot of time there yesterday. So anyhow, Anton, what's going on?
Oh, just another beautiful day in the American West.
Okay, so you are out there, I guess. Well, you've been posting a lot about Harvey Weinstein, and I guess Las Vegas is part of Greater Hollywood to a certain extent, and you seem to have some strong feelings about the issue, and, I'm keeping the conversations pretty open-ended this week. It's catching up with people, so just want to know what you think.
Well, there are a couple of things here that are a bit contradictory, but nevertheless, I think you need to look at both sides of it. On the one hand, of course, we have the massive hypocrisy surrounding the situation where, of course, if this had been somebody affiliated with major Republican politics and politicians, this would have been the end of the world, basically. Now, of course, it's being treated as something quite different. Now, on the other hand, you could say that, let me think here, we have here a prototypical big shot Hollywood movie producer behaving in a way which is along the lines of a prototypical big shot Hollywood movie producer. Mm-hmm. I am just so shocked that people are so shocked about this whole thing. I mean, if there was anything that was more predictable than this, it's like saying that Hugh Hefner may have had lightly clad, slightly younger women in the Playboy Mansion. Well,
Wait. You would have shocked
the devil out of me.
There's a huge distinction to be made, whether, whatever you want to say about Hugh Hefner or not. The issue is consent, and everyone knew what they were getting into with Hefner, pretty much. I haven't heard any stories about that or being told you'll never work again if you don't do this. It's a total...
Oh, no, you're right. I mean,
I know. I just want to make
there's a wide span of, all of the individual circumstances here. You can imagine that many of them were totally over the line and all of that. But I'm talking about in a broader sense that, there was something hanky going on here. Well, I don't think that should be as clear. There probably were things going on here that went above and beyond any reasonable line. But, when sometimes also people come at it 5, 10, and 15 or 20 years after the fact, I have a hard time, taking at full serious value every little detail of what a disaster it was that time on the casting couch 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, for crying out loud, should they not have said something? Of course, if they were a minor, it would be a different story.
Yeah.
But, if you're talking about grown 20 years later, it makes me I think that we need to be a little bit careful about just suddenly accepting every single little allegation decades after you even remember their name. And but anyway, that's sort of aside from the massive
I want to make the point,
political-oriented hypocrisy about
Anton, I want to make a point, though. First of all, I apologize. Your connection's not that great here, but hopefully people can live with that. But the other point is it's like there's nothing to lose by being a woman, and the women, it's the attractive women who get the sexual harassment. Let's be honest here. Rosie O'Donnell probably didn't have to worry about it, though she was a homecoming queen in her early 20s. It's the attractive ones, and there ain't that much value to that part of their acting career when they're in their 40s. Like Ashley Judd, great. You're making these claims when you're 45, however old she is, but you're not getting those roles anymore. You have nothing to lose. I admire someone like, Kate Beckinsale just didn't give in to his advances. She didn't speak up about it till now. But there's not. It's like being an NFL running back and then speaking out when you're in your mid-30s, when you're done anyway about something. No, you do it in your prime if you want credit.
Yeah, no, I think that all is pretty clear. But I have thankfully stayed pretty far away in general from sort of the Hollywood politics of things and so forth. But I do think that this would have been treated very, very differently had it been some sort of right winger involved in this whole thing. I mean, you look at what happened to Bill O'Reilly for
Right.
things that were seemingly far more milder, being basically having some conversation with somebody in a bar that one person apparently years thereafter didn't like. I mean, he was chased out of town for that. I mean, is just exactly. This was on a whole different level. As you said, some of these things may not have been consensual in an egregious manner. And then there's probably a lot of gray zones involved in this whole thing. But on the whole, I mean, any Republican or right-wing leaning person who would have been accused of 1/10 of this stuff would have been completely chased out of town a long time ago.
Yes, Clarence Thomas, so that works.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that was, you have just completely unsubstantiated, loose and vague accusations about the mildest of things, relatively speaking, and it's just the end of it.
Interesting. Any other thoughts on this? What do you think will happen? I mean, I talked with Shad Olson yesterday about the #MeToo campaign. To me, that's almost a way of obscuring the real issue, which is the Democrat Hollywood complex. It's not a universal thing. It's a Democrat Hollywood thing.
Yeah, what they're trying to do now, of course, is to leverage what happened here into basically saying, more or less everybody did it, and everybody, by everybody we mean there's probably going to be a lot of Republican big fish somewhere in the equation, maybe not in Hollywood, but somewhere between New York and Los Angeles. We'll find somebody who may have done something bad. I mean, if they could catch David Koch in one of these things, it would be some sort of major scandal. Of course, they'd never do that, but you see the point is that they're trying to now cast a wide net and then say, oh well, Harvey Weinstein thing that was deplorable, but here we have 5 other little people somewhere across the prairie, somewhere between Illinois and Wyoming that could possibly have also done something mean and nasty. So therefore, we can forget about this whole thing. That's probably what they are trying to, the way that they're trying to shake the tree with taking this approach.
Yeah, next thing you know, they're going to be talking about the way John McCain treated his first wife when she was no longer useful to him. No, they'll never talk about that. Of course, he's one of them. It's a joke.
Yeah. No, I mean the analogies I think here I do think that everybody suddenly reminded themselves about who was that Bill Clinton guy again? I mean, wasn't there a lot of these stories that sounded somewhere between the blue dress and sitting on top of somebody's his intern on the floor of the Oval Office?
Leave Monica out of it. That's consensual. That was consensual, and she wasn't even underage. That was consensual. There's plenty of non-consensual stuff which we can talk about.
Oh yeah, no, to be sure. But in terms of sort of the most salacious, otherwise, we all remember 20 years ago when the Starr report hit, and we kind of sifted through those pages. And to this moment, there just has been nothing that I can think of that beats it in terms of sensationalism. I mean, in the Oval Office, for crying out loud. Yeah. I mean, that was just in a class all by itself. I mean, for all of the stories that they're trying to invent, one crazier than the next about Trump. He hasn't done anything of the kind. So
he did.
This still stands out.
Yeah, of course, the New York Times did report that when he offered a bikini to a woman who was there for a pool party, that was on the front page of the New York Times this summer. He said, "Would you like a bikini to wear for this pool party?" That's pretty scandalous there. What do you say?
Yeah, I guess depending on what the state from which the lady was coming, it's either a long or a short from the textile industry. So I don't know. I think that's probably the only implication there. But I think this will die down pretty quick. Part of it being that Harvey Weinstein is a name that media wants to forget about real quick here.
Yep. Interesting point you pointed out on Facebook on a different topic, also related to California. The fires, which are pretty devastating right now, but are not that historically unprecedented.
Yeah, no, typical as with sort of the left and younger people and everybody who has an agenda with these things, they tend to look at these things as if they've never happened before. I don't care whether it's climate in general or, whatever other issue at hand, but, they talk about these fires being unprecedented. Well, they are on the higher end of the scale for what has happened in the last 60 years. But you have to realize that between about 1930 and about 1956, we had very close to a 90%, certainly an 80%, maybe a 90% reduction in the acreage of forest fires in this country that were breaking out. So we were coming from a point here where we've really had historically speaking, for the last 60 years, a fairly low level of forest fires, and this year might be a little bit higher than the last, but in the big scheme of things, it's not really a lot. It happens to be that when people in San Francisco, Berkeley, and Silicon Valley can smell it, and for that matter down in Orange County, it's a really big deal. But if it happens, a few miles further away in some other direction and the wind is blowing in the other direction, then the story is substantially off the front pages.
And a point that should be made is not so much for Northern California, but Southern California is not a place historically people really lived in or could live in because it's not really fit for human habitation. Like, without the big efforts with the Colorado River, it's a dry climate. And that's not where people usually live. You're from Sweden, which historically is a forested area. I'm from the Philadelphia area, which really doesn't have to worry about any natural disasters. I'm from near a creek that leads to the river, which leads to the Chesapeake Bay. That's historically where humans have lived, near rivers and temperate climates or forests, whatever.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you even look at a place like Washington, D.C., you talk about a nasty swampland, but Washington, D.C. was a small town until the invention of the air conditioning system, which also happened to be roughly coinciding with FDR taking a seat in the presidency. And, of course, that is the moment when Washington, D.C. exploded in terms of the size of the city. Nobody wanted to be there. You went there as a legislature for a short period of time, maybe a few weeks closer to the winter time than anything else, and then you got the devil out of there for the better part of the year. So, whether it's Washington, D.C.
so bad there. Come on. Spring
it's okay, but broadly speaking, it's not the kind of place where you would really be comfortable all year round lacking air conditioning. So whether it's that or in a place that lacks water or that lacks something else that's really important, I don't think that California is at the end of the rope there in terms of being the worst place you could be, but certainly what has helped there, as with some of these other warmer climates in the Smile State, is the advent of air conditioning, and we've obviously seen that over the last 80 or so years.
Yeah, but I guess the point we're making is forest fires are much more likely in places where they don't have evenly spread rainfall that's pretty consistent throughout the year. That's why it's just more of
you're absolutely right. No, that certainly adds to it. And, of course, then you have a plethora of a long list of red tape that has prevented people in these states from adequately trying to manage the matter because, of course, you have to have a permit or many permits to deal with anything so that you don't upset a little obscure rat with wings that sits in some random tree somewhere, and that has an impact both on the water supply for the farmers in California, but it also has an impact on the ability of a place like California to prevent and manage forest fires.
Yep. All righty, Anton, there's plenty more we could talk about, but I just wanted to get back in the swing of things, have you on again, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon. As always, very informative, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming on Backlash.
Good talking to you, Adam. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.